In a world constantly struggling for answers, a voice rises above the din, challenging beliefs and shaking the foundations of faith. But what happens when that voice is confronted? When the leader of over 1 billion souls is rebuked before everyone's eyes, accused of denying the very essence of his faith? Shocking, isn't it? To deny Christ is to deny Christianity. Sharp words thrown like lightning, causing an earthquake of doubt and tension. Are you ready to dive into this intriguing story? To confront the questions many are afraid to ask? Are you ready to discover the secrets behind these explosive words? Subscribe now, activate your notification bell, and join us on this journey of discovery. Don't miss a moment in this story that promises not only to reveal, but also to transform. In a surprising turn of events that has shaken the foundations of the Vatican, Monsignor Marian Eleganti, a prominent figure in the Catholic Church, has issued a public challenge to Pope Francis's policies of evangelization and interfaith dialogue. The doctrinal confrontation not only highlights internal tensions within the Holy See, but also raises profound questions about the future of the Church in an increasingly pluralistic world. Known for his strict adherence to traditional Church doctrine, Monsignor Eleganti has openly criticized what he sees as Pope Francis's overly conciliatory approach to other religions. In a series of passionate statements and interviews with Catholic media, Eleganti has expressed concern that the Vatican's current direction could undermine the Church's central mission to proclaim the gospel of Christ. The Church is at a crossroads, Monsignor Eleganti declared. While I appreciate the Holy Father's desire to promote peace and understanding among different faith communities, we cannot compromise or obscure the truth of the gospel. It is our sacred duty to ensure that the word of Christ is heard clearly and unambiguously throughout the world. Eleganti's words come at a time when Pope Francis has worked tirelessly to build bridges between the Catholic Church and other religions. Their efforts to address global issues such as climate change, poverty, and migration often include dialogue with leaders of other faiths in search of shared solutions to universal challenges. But some conservative elements in the Vatican have seen these initiatives as a departure from the Church's core doctrines, sparking a passionate debate about the balance between preserving religious identity and engaging in modern ecumenism. Eleganti's challenge raises a key question: how far can the Church go in its mission of dialogue with the world without losing the essence of its message? The tension between tradition and innovation has never been more palpable, and Pope Francis's next decisions could set the course of the Catholic Church for decades. A prominent voice among conservatives, Monsignor Eleganti has been particularly vocal, expressing his dismay at what he sees as a weakening of traditional principles that have always led the Church. We are witnessing a redefinition of what it means to be Catholic that goes against our heritage and the teachings we have received, he said in a recent interview, echoing the sentiments of many who feel alienated by the Pope's progressive approach. This conservative backlash is gaining momentum at a time when the world is facing deep divisions, and the Church, traditionally seen as a pillar of stability, seems to be oscillating between its historic identity and a new role that seeks to be more inclusive and welcoming. The tension is palpable within the walls of the Vatican and extends to parishes around the world, where faithful and clergy are debating the future of the Church. Critics led by Eleganti argue that attempts to modernize practices and beliefs undermine doctrine and could fragment the faith. The danger is that by trying to be all things to all people, we end up being none to none and losing our souls in the process, says the theologian, who asked not to be identified, echoing a common conservative fear. These criticisms are not limited to doctrinal issues. They also include Pope Francis's openness to dialogue with other religions and his emphasis on social issues such as poverty and climate change, which some see as a distraction from the Church's true mission. The Pope's response to these criticisms has been to reaffirm his commitment to a Catholicism that is both true to its roots and responsive to the emerging needs of the modern world. The clash has profound implications not only for the Church but for the world as a whole, as the Catholic Church's positions influence global social and moral debates. The outcome of this internal struggle could define the trajectory of Catholicism's influence in the 21st century. making the current controversy of interest not only to Catholics, but to anyone who observes the interactions between religion and society. Recently, a key statement by the Pope on matters of faith and pastoral practice was mistranslated into several languages, causing a wave of confusion among the faithful and clergy in different parts of the world. The divergent versions of the Pope's message have created a space for sharp criticism from conservative groups already suspicious of the Pope's reform initiatives. The integrity of communication is fundamental to our mission, a Vatican spokesman said, underscoring the gravity of the situation. The words of the Holy Father carry enormous weight, and any deviation in their delivery can lead to significant doctrinal and pastoral consequences. The incident underscored the complexity of the challenges facing the Church in its mission to communicate with a diverse global community. The Vatican, aware of the need for accuracy, invests in a top-notch team of translators, but even minor errors can be highlighted given the sensitive nature of the topics covered. Critics have seized on these lapses to question not only the translator's competence, but also the intentions and clarity of Pope Francis. If even your words cannot be properly understood, how can we trust your guidance? Asks the prelate, who prefers to remain anonymous, echoing a sense of uncertainty that has spread throughout the Church. On the other hand, the Pope's defenders argue that the errors in translation should not obscure the true message of inclusion and mercy that Francis wants to convey. They emphasize the importance of looking beyond the words to understand the spirit of his instructions, which aim to renew the Church and bring it closer to the faithful, especially the most marginalized. This translation crisis raises profound questions about how the Church deals with linguistic diversity in its communication and how this affects the interpretation of doctrine. The event highlights the need for a more robust strategy to ensure that the Pope's words are faithfully transmitted to all peoples and cultures, avoiding misunderstandings that could break the unity of the faith. The decision to adopt a literal translation comes after a series of incidents in which Pope Francis' words were misinterpreted by translations that attempted to adapt the content to the cultural context of the audience. While well-intentioned, these adjustments often distorted the original message, leading to confusion and negative opinions from both conservatives and progressives in the Church. From now on, all of the Holy Father's statements will be translated word for word, the Vatican's communications secretary announced at a news conference packed with journalists and cameras. This is a commitment to truth and transparency, intended to ensure that Pope Francis's voice is heard exactly as he says it, regardless of linguistic boundaries. The new procedure is already changing not only how messages are sent, but also how they are received around the world. The move is seen as honoring the integrity of the Pope's message while respecting the intelligence and diversity of the faithful. But it is also a shrewd diplomatic move, allowing the Vatican to exercise tighter control over the narrative surrounding the Pope's frequent and sometimes controversial statements. Critics of the previous approach welcomed the change, arguing that the excessive mediation in earlier translations obscured more than it clarified. We need clarity, not translations that soften or change the meaning of our leadership, commented one senior theologian, echoing a popular sentiment among many clergy. But the new policy also comes with challenges. Literal translations can lead to cultural misunderstandings, with nuances of language and context playing a key role in interpreting religious and diplomatic texts. The Vatican has been cautious in implementing the change, strengthening its teams of interpreters and translators with experts in linguistics and theology to ensure that the full meaning of the Pope's words is widely understood. In addition to changing translation practices, the Vatican has stepped up its training and education efforts to ensure that church leaders around the world are better equipped to explain and contextualize the Pope's teachings in their local cultures. These workshops and seminars are designed not only to clarify papal statements, but also to strengthen unity within the global diversity of the Church. The impact of this change in Vatican practices is already palpable. Pope Francis's words, delivered without the filter of softening rewrites, have taken on new force, provoking open dialogues and sometimes heated debates. This strategy not only reflects a commitment to authenticity and accountability, but also underscores the importance of clear and direct communication in contemporary global leadership. As Pope Francis continues to push through a series of progressive reforms, internal divisions within the Catholic Church have become increasingly evident, revealing a spectrum of opinions ranging from more traditional conservatives to reformists who support the new direction proposed by the Pope. This scenario of divergence not only highlights the diversity of thought within the clergy, but also signals a defining moment that could define the future of Catholicism. Since the beginning of his papacy, Pope Francis has been a polarizing figure in the Church, known as much for his humility and pastoral approach as for his progressive stances on issues such as social inclusion, ecumenism, and interfaith dialogue. His initiatives to reform the Roman Curia and promote greater transparency in Vatican finances have been seen by many as necessary steps to modernize the ancient institution. Yet these same actions have drawn discontent from the most conservative quarters, who see these reforms as a threat to traditional church doctrine. The Church has always been a place of diversity, but now we face an ideological schism that questions the very heart of our beliefs and practices, explains the priest who prefers to remain anonymous, reflecting concerns that internal tensions could lead to an irreversible fracture. On the other hand, reformists say the Church must evolve to meet the challenges of a globalized and diverse world. These divisions were particularly evident during the Synod of Bishops, a gathering of church leaders from around the world to discuss key issues facing the Church. Topics such as the ordination of married men in the Amazon, the Church's position on same-sex marriage, and the ordination of women to the diaconate were the subject of intense debate and disagreement. On the one hand, conservatives such as Cardinal Raymond Burke have been vocal in their criticism, accusing the Pope of sowing confusion among the faithful with his flexible stance on moral and doctrinal issues. We are seeing a dilution of our basic teachings in favor of an agenda that seems more political than spiritual, Burke said at a recent conference. On the other hand, progressive clerics like Cardinal Christoph Schönborn of Vienna say the Pope's actions are a necessary reflection of the social and cultural changes of the 21st century. Pope Francis is calling us to be an outward-looking church that dialogues with the world and understands the complexities of human life today, Schönborn says. In addition to the clergy, lay people are also deeply involved in these discussions, with grassroots groups expressing both support and opposition to the Vatican's direction. Social media and online forums have become heated arenas for debate, reflecting the emotional commitment of believers to their faith. While divisions remain, Pope Francis has sought to maintain an openness to dialogue, emphasizing the need to hear all voices in the Church. A true family is not afraid to argue, to face its conflicts, because it knows that in the end, there will be peace and understanding, he said in his homily, emphasizing his vision of a church that, despite its internal differences, seeks unity and diversity. Since taking office in 2013, Pope Francis has been a source of constant inspiration to many and controversy to others. With an approach that is often seen as revolutionary, he has not hesitated to address sensitive issues such as climate change, the need for greater integration in the Church, refugee rights, and the importance of interfaith dialogue. His words often reach beyond the walls of the Vatican to reach the ears of world leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens, spreading messages that challenge the status quo and encourage action and reflection. One of the most obvious aspects of the global impact of Pope Francis's pronouncements is in the area of international relations. Whether he is addressing the United States Congress, addressing the United Nations, or participating in interfaith meetings, the Pope uses every platform to advocate for greater brotherhood among peoples and nations. For example, his 2015 call for global action on climate change was seen as a major catalyst in influencing the discussion and subsequent adoption of the Paris Agreement. Moreover, Francis is not afraid to enter the minefields of global politics. He has openly addressed the refugee crisis, calling attention to the moral responsibility of countries to open their borders to those fleeing war and poverty. This position has sparked a wave of debate in countries with restrictive immigration policies, pressuring leaders to reconsider and, in some cases, soften their stances. On a societal level, the Pope's statements have also had a profound effect. By calling for a more inclusive church, Francis has paved the way for a more open dialogue on issues such as same-sex marriage and the role of women in the church. Such discussions, while controversial, have encouraged a re-examination of Catholic practices and doctrines in communities around the world, fueling movements for greater equality and acceptance within the church itself. Not all the fallout in the church is positive. There are also strong currents of resistance. Some clergy and laity see his reforms and declarations as a threat to Catholic orthodoxy. This division is another reflection of the ability of his words to shake established foundations, forcing an internal reflection on the future of the church. On the other hand, many believers and new followers have been inspired by his emphasis on humility, mercy, and service to the marginalized. Grassroots groups both inside and outside the church have mobilized with renewed energy, motivated by his call for social action and climate justice. These are people who may never have been to church, but who find in the Pope's words an echo of their own concerns and hopes for the world. Finally, the influence of Pope Francis's statements extends to the media and popular culture, where he is often portrayed as a progressive leader willing to challenge the norms of his institution for the greater good. Whether it's in films, documentaries, or internet memes, Francis's public image as a charismatic reformer only amplifies the reach and impact of his words. The Church, an institution that has existed for 2 millennia, has always had to navigate the turbulent waters of its own expansion, facing everything from internal schisms to confrontations with secular movements. But the current era of globalization has brought a new set of challenges and opportunities. Pope Francis has been promoting a vision of a more inclusive church since the beginning of his papacy, engaged in dialogue with the world, not only with other Christian denominations but also with other religions and social movements. One of the most important initiatives of Francis's papacy is to strengthen interfaith dialogue. This commitment was clearly reflected in the document on human fraternity signed in Abu Dhabi in 2019, in which the Pope and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed El-Tayeb, pledged to work together to combat extremism. But this path has not been without criticism. Conservative sectors of the Church question whether such openness could weaken Catholic identity, fearing that the essence of evangelization, proclaiming Christ as Savior, could be compromised in favor of religious pluralism. But advocates of this approach argue that in an increasingly interconnected and religiously diverse world, dialogue is essential not only for world peace, but also for effective evangelization. Understanding and respecting the beliefs of others, they suggest, can open doors that would otherwise be closed to religious proselytism. The future of evangelization in the Catholic Church seems to be leaning toward a more personalized and less doctrinal approach, focused more on witnessing than conversion. This new strategy, informed by Francis's own pastoral style, emphasizes the importance of meeting people where they are, understanding their struggles and hopes. In a digital world, it also means a more assertive and compassionate presence on social media, where young people, often alienated by the traditional language of the Church, are actively engaged. Current controversies, such as the heated debate over whether to ordain married men as priests in the Amazon, or the debates over gender and sexuality, suggest that the Church is at a turning point. Any decision made now could not only resolve current tensions, but also set a path for future generations of Catholics. Moreover, the sexual abuse crisis and demands for greater transparency and accountability have prompted the Church to reform not only its governance structures, but also its communications with the faithful. This move toward greater openness and accountability is seen by many as essential for the Church's survival in the 21st century. Despite the challenges, the promise of renewal offers a glimmer of hope. With each step toward interfaith dialogue and each attempt to better relate evangelization to the modern world, the Catholic Church is not only responding to the crises of the present, but also preparing to be a moral and spiritual force in a world that is changing rapidly. The statements by Pope Francis, known for his direct and often provocative style, have been met with a mixture of praise and concern. While many believers see him as a voice of needed renewal, others interpret his words as a potential threat to the doctrinal integrity that has been the backbone of the Church for more than 2 millennia. Interpreting the words of a pope has never been an easy task, given the theological and moral weight they carry. But under Francis's papacy, that task has become even more complex. With his statements, which often touch on sensitive topics such as the inclusion of homosexuals, the role of women in the church, and dialogue with other religions, Francis has called on both conservatives and progressives to reconsider their positions. On the one hand, his words are seen as a rejuvenating balm, capable of healing old wounds and bringing back to the fold those who have felt marginalized by traditional doctrine. On the other hand, there is a clear concern that those same words could weaken the basic tenets of the Catholic faith, leading to a fragmentation of the doctrinal unity on which the Church is based. Speculation is fueled not only by the Pope's statements but also by the way they are presented and disseminated by the media. In an age dominated by social media and 24-hour news cycles, every word the Pope says is analyzed, often taken out of context, generating a myriad of interpretations that can both confuse and clarify. In the Church, these interpretations are the subject of intense debate. Seminars, parish meetings, and theological conferences become arenas where clergy and laity seek to unpack the true meaning and implications of the Pope's words. These debates, while essential to the health of a living, breathing Church, also expose the difficulties of maintaining a unified vision in a diverse global community.